Welcome to AI Vodcast, where artificial intelligence simplifies the most complex topics and connects them to your everyday life. Whether it's ancient wisdom, cutting-edge technology, or thought-provoking concepts, this is your space for relatable, insightful, and AI-driven conversations that make even the toughest ideas click. In today's episode, we're diving into Chapter 3 of the Bhagavad Gita. It's all about karma yoga, the art of purposeful action. We'll explore how this ancient wisdom tackles some of life's biggest questions. What's the point of action? How do we find meaning in what we do, especially when life gets challenging? And why is retreating from the world often not the solution? This episode will leave you with practical insights you can use to navigate your own challenges with resilience, purpose, and peace. We'll also explore how selfless action and detachment from outcomes can transform the way we approach life's ups and downs. You won't want to miss the practical takeaways waiting for you toward the end. They're not just concepts, they're tools for living a life of balance and grace. Just a quick note before we dive in. AI Vodcast is entirely AI generated. Every conversation, every insight is brought to you by artificial intelligence, designed to bring value, spark curiosity, and explore new ways AI can connect with our lives. We're here to celebrate curiosity and creativity, so let's keep the spirit of this journey inclusive and positive. If you find today's episode engaging, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd also love to hear from you. What's a topic you'd like this AI to break down next? Your suggestions help shape future episodes. Thank you for joining us on this exciting journey. Let's jump in and explore how karma yoga inspires a life of action, purpose, and connection.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be tackling some pretty big questions about how to live a fulfilling life, even when things get tough.
Sounds intense.
Oh, it is, but it's also really inspiring. We're diving into the world of karma yoga, as described in Chapter 3 of the Bhagavad Gita.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I've got a whole stack of sources here, some transcripts from YouTube videos that caught my eye, and some really thought-provoking commentaries.
Cool.
Yeah. So to set the scene, we're starting with a warrior, Arjuna, facing a battle that kind of sends him into an existential crisis.
Okay, so like a classic hero's journey moment.
Exactly. He starts questioning everything, like what's the point of action when knowledge seems so much more appealing?
It's a dilemma that I think a lot of us can relate to. Like, we grapple with these questions about our purpose and the impact of our actions all the time, you know?
It's like you're looking at this battle, knowing it's going to involve tough choices and potential suffering, and you're thinking, wouldn't I be better off just retreating and dedicating my life to contemplation and knowledge?
Right, and that's what makes this chapter where Krishna introduces the concept of karma yoga so powerful.
Because the truth is, as the Bhagavad Gita highlights, none of us can truly be inactive, not even for a second.
One of the YouTube transcripts I read used this analogy of a heron pretending to be in deep meditation while actually waiting to snatch a fish.
Oh, wow. I love that. That's such a vivid image.
Right. It really makes you think about how we can fool ourselves and others with outward appearances.
Totally.
Right.
Like we might seem inactive, but inside our minds are going a mile a minute with desires and plans.
Exactly. And the Bhagavad Gita encourages us to go beyond those superficial appearances and recognize that even the act of sitting in meditation is still an action.
So we can't escape action.
Yeah.
But then the question becomes, how do we approach it in a way that leads to a fulfilling life? That's where karma yoga comes in, right?
Exactly. Karma yoga isn't about giving up on action. It's about changing our relationship to it. It's about understanding our prescribed duties, the actions that are naturally ours to do, and performing them without getting caught up in what the results might be.
What exactly do we mean by prescribed duties in this context? It sounds a bit old-fashioned.
It's a concept that can be a little tricky to grasp in our modern world. But think of it this way. Each of us has a unique set of talents, skills, and circumstances that shape our lives. Our prescribed duties are those actions that flow naturally from who we are and where we find ourselves. It's about aligning our actions with our inner nature and our role in the larger web of life.
Okay, I'm starting to see how that applies even today. So if we're not supposed to be attached to the results, what is the motivation for action in karma yoga?
There are some really compelling examples in the sources you provided, like the story of King Janak, who achieved spiritual perfection while still ruling his kingdom. It shows that outward action doesn't have to be a barrier to inner peace.
Right. And then there's this idea that even those who have achieved enlightenment, who are supposedly liberated from the cycle of karma, still choose to act for the benefit of the world.
It's like, why would they do that if they've already reached the ultimate goal?
It really makes you think about what truly drives us.
It suggests that true liberation doesn't mean withdrawing from the world or becoming indifferent to the suffering of others. It's about acting from a place of pure compassion with a sense of service to something beyond our own individual needs.
It's almost like their actions become a form of offering, a way of participating in something much larger than themselves. Which brings us to this whole concept of yajna, the cycle of sacrifice.
One of the YouTube videos explained it so beautifully with this example. Sacrifices offered during Vedic rituals were believed to please the gods, who would then send rain to nourish the earth and provide food for all beings. It's this incredible image of interconnectedness, of giving and receiving woven into the fabric of existence.
How can we translate that concept to our modern lives? It's not like we're performing Vedic rituals every day.
True. But even if we're not engaged in traditional rituals, I think there's a profound truth in that idea of a cosmic cycle of giving and receiving. It's about recognizing that our actions have an impact, that we're part of a web of interdependence. So even something as simple as doing your job with care and dedication can be seen as a contribution to that cycle.
Exactly. It's a shift in perspective. Instead of seeing our work as just a means to an end, we can approach it as a way to serve others, to contribute to the well-being of the community, even to participate in this larger cosmic dance.
It makes you think about how a shift in perspective can change everything. Instead of seeing our work as just a way to make a living, we can approach it as a way to serve others, to contribute to the well-being of the community, even to participate in this larger cosmic dance.
And that shift in perspective can be incredibly liberating. But the Gita also acknowledges that it's not always easy. We're constantly bombarded by desires, distractions, and the temptation to act out of self-interest.
It's that internal battle, isn't it? Trying to stay true to these higher principles while also navigating the very real challenges of being human.
The Bhagavad Gita is very clear about identifying the enemy within lust, and it doesn't sugarcoat the dangers. The commentaries I read use such vivid imagery to describe the power of lust, like smoke covering fire dust, obscuring a mirror. It's a powerful reminder of how our desires can cloud our judgment and lead us down a path of suffering.
And it's in this context that Arjuna raises a crucial question. Why do people do things they know are wrong, even when they don't want to?
It's like there's a force within them compelling them to act against their better judgment.
And the Gita's answer points directly to the power of lust, how it can hijack our senses, our minds, and even our intellect.
So if lust is this powerful enemy within, how do we even begin to fight it? This is where that idea of the hierarchy of being comes in, right? The soul at the top, but constantly being influenced by our senses, mind, and intellect.
Exactly. The Gita explains that lust can affect us on multiple levels. It can hook our senses, leading us to crave pleasurable objects. It can cloud our minds, making it difficult to think clearly and make wise choices. And it can even distort our intellect, leading us to rationalize our desires and justify actions that we know deep down are harmful.
No wonder it feels so hard to control our desires sometimes. It's like they're coming at us from all directions.
But the Gita also offers a path forward. It suggests that by strengthening our connection to the soul, to that higher part of ourselves, we can gain greater control over these lower impulses.
So it's not about suppressing our desires or pretending they don't exist. It's more about understanding them, seeing them for what they are, and then choosing a different path.
It's a journey of self-discovery, of learning to harness the power of our minds and direct them towards something more fulfilling than fleeting pleasures.
It almost sounds like a training process. But I'm curious, how do we actually do that? We'll have to explore that in more detail in part 2.
Sounds good.
But before we go, I have a question for you. If we really did see our work as a form of offering, not just as a way to make a living, how do you think that would change our experience?
That's a powerful question. It makes you wonder if maybe that shift in perspective, that sense of offering our efforts to something larger than ourselves, could be the key to unlocking a deeper sense of purpose and fulfillment. Welcome back to our deep dive into karma yoga.
As described in Chapter 3 of the Bhagavad Gita.
That's right. In Part 1, we were talking about selfless action detachment from results and how our desires, especially lust, can cloud our judgment.
Right, like it can really hijack our decision-making.
Exactly. So now let's look at some practical ways to actually put these principles into action in our lives.
Okay, so in Part 1, we talked about the importance of shifting our motivation instead of always focusing on what we're going to get out of our actions. What if we try to act from a place of higher purpose?
That's an excellent place to start. The Gita uses this phrase, work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu.
Vishnu.
Yeah, Vishnu, represents that preserver aspect of the divine in Hinduism. But even if you're not coming from a Hindu background, the core idea here is that you're dedicating your actions to something beyond your own limited ego.
Okay, so it's like instead of thinking, I'm doing this to get ahead or achieve some personal goal, you're thinking, I'm offering this effort as a contribution to something larger than myself.
Precisely. That something larger could be your family, your community, all of humanity, or even a cause you deeply believe in. The key is to shift the focus away from your own ego and connect your actions to a sense of service and positive impact.
One of the YouTube transcripts I found described this as connecting your karma to Krishna.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was a really interesting way to phrase it. It's like, instead of getting all tangled up in the potential outcomes, you're offering your actions up to something or someone you consider truly worthy.
Yes, and that act of offering can actually help you loosen the grip of attachment.
How so?
Well, because when you're focused on serving something beyond yourself, the personal wins and losses just don't seem as important.
It reminds me of that example we talked about earlier, the enlightened beings who choose to continue working for the benefit of the world, even though they've supposedly transcended the need for action. It's pure service motivating them.
It's a powerful example. And the Gita suggests that cultivating this same spirit of selfless action can help us break free from the limitations of our ego and find a much deeper sense of fulfillment.
But how do we actually do that in a practical sense?
Yeah.
It's easy to talk about shifting our motivation, but our minds are so good at justifying selfish actions.
That's where some of the more specific techniques described in the Gita come into play. It talks about gaining control over the senses, the mind, and the intellect. Remember that hierarchy we discussed?
Right, the idea that our soul is at the top, but it's constantly being influenced by our senses, our mind, and our intellect.
So one of the first steps is becoming more aware of what's happening at those lower levels. What are your senses drawn to? What thoughts and desires are swirling around in your mind? What stories is your intellect weaving to rationalize your actions?
It sounds like mindfulness practices could be helpful here, like paying attention to those thoughts and impulses without judgment, just observing them curiously.
Absolutely, because once you start to see those patterns clearly, you can make conscious choices about how to respond to them. The Gita talks about bringing the senses under control, not by suppressing them entirely, but by directing them toward more wholesome objects and experiences.
So instead of letting your senses run wild, chasing after every fleeting pleasure, you're intentionally engaging them in activities that nourish your body, mind, and soul.
Exactly. And the same principle applies to the mind. Instead of letting your thoughts race uncontrollably, dwelling on worries, anxieties, or resentments, you can train your mind to focus on positive and uplifting thoughts. Things like practicing gratitude, compassion, and forgiveness can be very powerful.
It sounds like a lot of inner work.
It is, but the rewards are immense. The Gita suggests that by purifying our minds and senses, we create a more fertile ground for spiritual growth, for connecting with that higher part of ourselves.
But what about the intellect? The Gita mentions that even the intellect can be clouded by lust and ignorance. How do we bring that part of ourselves into alignment with karma yoga?
This is where the study of scripture, contemplation of wisdom teachings, and guidance from a qualified teacher can be incredibly helpful. The intellect can be a powerful tool for discernment, for understanding the deeper principles of life and making choices that are aligned with those truths.
So it's not just about doing good deeds blindly. It's about cultivating wisdom and understanding, about using our intellect to make informed choices that are in harmony with the highest good.
That's right. And as our understanding deepens, the Gita suggests that we start to see the world through a different lens. We can see the interconnectedness of all things, the play of cause and effect, the ways in which our actions ripple out and impact the lives of others.
This brings us back to that beautiful concept of yajna, the cycle of sacrifice. One of the sources I read explained it as a cosmic dance of giving and receiving, where we make offerings through our actions, and those offerings create a flow of abundance that nourishes and sustains all beings.
It's a powerful image, and it invites us to participate consciously in this cycle, to see our work, our relationships, our very lives as a sacred offering.
But let's face it, life isn't always a smooth and harmonious dance. There are times when we face difficult choices, make mistakes, and experience suffering, despite our best efforts to live in accordance with karma yoga. How does the Gita address those inevitable challenges?
That's a crucial question, and one we'll explore further in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so stay tuned as we delve into the Gita's teachings on how to navigate life's inevitable ups and downs while staying grounded in the principles of karma yoga. Welcome back to our deep dive into karma yoga.
We're in the final stretch now.
We've explored a lot so far, like the idea of selfless action and detachment.
Right, and the challenge of controlling our senses and minds.
And how to kind of put those principles into practice in our everyday lives.
It's not always easy, though, is it?
Definitely not. Life has a way of throwing curveballs. We're going to face difficulties, setbacks, even suffering sometimes.
That's for sure. So how do we stay true to the principles of karma yoga when things get tough?
That's the big question.
Well, the Bhagavad Gita doesn't shy away from the reality of suffering. It's an inherent part of life. There's no magic formula for avoiding pain or hardship.
Yeah, that's true.
But the Gita does offer guidance on how to navigate those challenges with more grace and equanimity.
One of the sources I read talked about understanding the nature of the material world. It described the world as a place of duality, where joy and sorrow, pleasure and pain, success and failure are all interwoven.
It's like that classic yin-yang symbol, right?
Exactly. Opposing forces are always present.
The Gita suggests that by accepting this inherent duality, we can start to loosen our attachment to specific outcomes.
Because if we understand that both good and bad experiences are temporary and ultimately out of our control.
Right. We can cultivate a more balanced perspective.
So it's not about denying our feelings or pretending we're not affected by pain or loss.
No.
It's about recognizing those experiences as part of the natural ebb and flow of life.
Yeah.
Like riding a wave almost.
Exactly. And this is where the concept of surrender becomes even more important.
Okay, so we talked about surrender in part 2.
Yeah, and remember, we're not talking about giving up or becoming passive. It's about surrendering our ego's desire to control every aspect of our experience.
Letting go.
Yes. It's about trusting in a higher power in the wisdom of the universe to unfold as it should.
One of the YouTube transcripts I found used this beautiful image of a leaf floating down a stream. We can fight against the current, desperately trying to force the leaf to go in a certain direction.
Right.
Or we can surrender to the flow, trusting that the leaf will eventually reach its destination.
I love that metaphor.
Me too. But how do we cultivate that trust, especially when we're in the midst of suffering? When we're overwhelmed by pain or fear, it's so easy to lose sight of the bigger picture.
The Gita emphasizes the importance of faith.
Faith.
Not blind faith, but a deep trust that's cultivated through experience, through the study of wisdom teachings, and through connection with something larger than ourselves.
So it's about finding that source of strength and support that can help us stay steady, even when it feels like everything around us is falling apart.
Exactly. That source can take many forms. It might be prayer meditation, connection with nature, or simply an unwavering belief that even in our darkest moments, there's a light guiding us forward.
It's also helpful to remember that even enlightened beings experience challenges, right?
Oh, absolutely.
They just approach them differently. They don't get caught up in the drama or allow those experiences to derail them from their path.
They've learned to cultivate a sense of equanimity, a steadiness of mind that allows them to navigate those ups and downs with grace and wisdom.
So it's not about becoming immune to suffering.
No, not at all.
It's about learning to respond to it in a way that doesn't create more suffering.
The Gita suggests that through the practice of karma yoga, we can develop this inner resilience, this ability to face life's challenges with courage, compassion, and a deep sense of peace.
It's a journey, not a destination. We're constantly learning, growing, making mistakes, picking ourselves up, and trying again.
And the Gita reminds us that even our mistakes can be valuable teachers.
Oh, for sure.
They help us refine our understanding, deepen our compassion, and strengthen our resolve to live a life of purpose and meaning.
This has been such a rich exploration of karma yoga. We've covered a lot of ground, from the idea of selfless action and detachment to surrendering to a higher power and navigating life's challenges with grace.
Yeah, it's been great.
Before we wrap up, I'd love to hear your thoughts on some of the key takeaways from this deep dive. What do you hope our listeners will carry with them from this exploration?
I hope our listeners will walk away with a deeper understanding of karma yoga as a path of action, not inaction.
Right action.
It's about engaging in the world with the spirit of service, of offering our efforts to something larger than ourselves.
And about learning to detach from the fruits of our actions, trusting that the universe will provide what we need when we need it.
Exactly. And cultivating that inner resilience that allows us to face life's inevitable challenges with courage, compassion, and a deep sense of peace.
Beautifully said. And for our listeners who are eager to explore these ideas further, I highly recommend picking up a copy of the Bhagavad Gita and diving into Chapter 3. You might be surprised by how much this ancient wisdom resonates with your modern life. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep living life of purpose and meaning.